heard of ESG in the past 3-4 years. Anu has been in this space for 20 years and is one of the most influential sustainability leaders in India. She works across countries and across sectors. And it's a pleasure to have her here as a keynote speaker. Over to you, Anu.
Thank you, Kirti. Hi, everyone. So I'm Anu Chaudhary, and as Kirti said, I have been in this space for over 2 decades. So I come from an era where, when people used to ask me what I do, and I used to say climate change, they would ask me, oh, is it? So how's the weather going to be tomorrow? So that's where I come from, and hence it is, extremely great for me now to be, amongst all of you and, largely working in this domain because after 22 years, I finally see that ESG is becoming core to businesses in many ways. And of course, there's a long way to go, but people have started understanding that it's not just something good to have, but rather important for the business to thrive. So with that introduction, let's just talk a little bit about the history and how ESG has evolved over the years. ESG is not a term that existed until, I think, 2018, 2019, or maybe it existed and nobody really knew about it. It evolved from the early 1990s, where we usually talked about EHS, environment, health and safety. And then it... are you not able to hear me clearly?
No, it's
Can you hear me now?
clear.
Okay. So from environment, health and safety, which was largely about the safety of the employees, because we were dealing mostly with manufacturing industries at that point in time, to sustainability, which focused on mitigating the negative environmental impact of a company or of an industry. And it was, again, a very reactive sort of approach. To corporate social responsibility, wherein there was some realization that it's not just the environmental impact that a company has, but also a social impact. And then, of course, we had the CSR regulation that came in, and it became a compliance issue, and companies started understanding corporate social responsibility a bit better, or started taking it seriously, rather. And then ESG came into the picture, which brings all of it together. Be it your own employee welfare, be it your responsibility towards the society, be it your responsibility towards the environment, and also looking at the impact of these external stakeholders, environment and society, on your business. So it is no longer about the company's impact, but rather also, the other way around. How could your business get impacted by these external factors? And that, I think, is kind of a trigger for most companies now to start looking at it as not just something you are doing for philanthropic reasons, not just something good to have, but rather something that could impact you and your business in the long run. So coming to environmental dimension, I understand, we don't need education on ESG here, but just to cover a little bit of parameters or elements that form the part of this E, S, and G dimensions. So environment factors, mainly are climate change and GHG emissions. GHG is greenhouse gases. Energy efficiency, regulatory compliance, biodiversity, waste management, sourcing and supply chain. And we will be discussing more about the relevance of each of these for different sorts of industries, diverse sectors, and also diverse geographies. When it comes to social, it's about human capital, product and service responsibility, human rights, labor, community outreach, health and safety, diversity and inclusion. Now, one thing I would like to highlight here is that many companies that we deal with, they usually equate the social dimension of ESG with CSR. But that's something completely wrong, because CSR is only a subset of ESG. And that's how it should be looked at. Coming to governance and economic dimension, so sales, profit, return on investment, data privacy and security, board structure and composition, accountability and transparency, executive compensation, anti-bribery and corruption, and many, many more. Of course, governance has been in the picture since the corporate law came into the picture. But what's not understood so far is, why do we even need to look at governance when we are talking about ESG? Why is it relevant? And we will be talking more about this during the discussion as well, and it would be very interesting to hear your thoughts on this. So why ESG counts? So these, World Economic Forum came up with these global mega trends that are going to influence our lives and our business. Climate change, ecosystem decline and natural resource scarcity, growing population, inequalities. So basically, we are now way beyond the time where half of the population was in denial of climate change. We have all accepted that it is happening. We have all suffered because of climate change in one way or the other. And there is no country in the world, be it rich or poor, which has not had the impact of climate change. So, talk about floods, droughts, major, forest fires, or, major natural disasters. All of these incidents have increased in frequency over the last 5-10 years. And it is only getting more and more worse. So what does that mean? That global warming is having an impact on our day-to-day lives. And not just as an individual or as a family, but also as a business, we need to be resilient towards these changes that are coming in and towards the increase in frequency of these natural disasters. One is to mitigate the impact, but the damage that we have done already, we are, of course, responsible now to reduce that damage as much as possible, but there is also no denying the fact that we will have to adapt to this new environment. So adaptation and mitigation have become equally important in today's day and age. So what is the impact of these global trends? The impact is that there are new regulations coming in. We are talking about new regulations coming in the form of carbon tax. In several countries, we have SEC in the US, in the United States, coming up with the requirement for companies to start reporting on their Scope 1, 2, and Scope 3 emissions. And we have the EU coming up with the most advanced of compliance and regulatory requirements, be it TCFD. So apologies in advance. ESG is full of abbreviations, okay? And no matter how much I try, something will come up. So please feel free to ask questions or note down your questions for the discussion later. So TCFD is Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. Basically, that is the one standard, global standard, which brings together financial implications of non-financial disclosures. And this is where it suddenly starts making sense to the CFOs of the company. So we will talk more about it. There's a lot that we could cover. And that brings me to the next point, wherein ESG is a universe. There is just so much you can do. There are a million things, million parameters you could be reporting on. But what is it that is most important for you? How do you understand that? That's very, very important. And hence, when we start working with our clients, we start at the very beginning of this spectrum, wherein we map the business, the geographies that the companies operate in, with what is relevant for them. You need not do everything overnight. What is it that could impact your business, and what is it where you have the maximum impact that you need to address? And that is called materiality. That is called a risk and opportunity assessment, for you to understand what are the risks your business faces and what are the opportunities therein. If you were proactive in the ESG initiatives, how would you be able to leverage the opportunities out of this? So, I'm going off track there. So, change in customer needs. Now, India is a young population, right? And the younger the population, the more educated the population, the more aware they are of environmental and social impact of a business, of a product. And they are asking questions. And they are not just going by a label, they are also asking how, or what is the process, what is the footprint, what are you doing to be a responsible company? And now businesses need to have these answers. So that's another thing which is driving companies to look towards ESG. Emergence of new stakeholders. So as I said, new regulations, communities, society, employees. So even for employee retention today, it's very, very important that people feel empowered, people feel proud of being a part of a certain organization. And now how do you encourage them to not only be a part of the organization, not only just doing their roles and responsibilities, but also taking the initiative, the larger initiative of making the company more responsible. Market distortions and volatility. COVID was the greatest example, how the complete market got disrupted, how supply chains got disrupted, and that opened the eyes for many of these companies which were until now in denial of ESG. They realized that tomorrow if they do not make their supply chains resilient, if they do not look at local productions, they could be in a lot of trouble. It could lead to a complete shutdown. So these were the triggers really over the last 5 years. Now coming to risk and opportunity, I will not cover too much about this, but when you look at ESG, these are two sides of the coin. If you decide to just continue your business as usual, you decide not to upgrade your systems in terms of ESG, there are several risks that you are facing, be it regulatory risk, reputational risk, physical risks, as we just spoke about, due to physical climate change, then market risks, litigation, social risks. Now, if, however, you are a proactive company and you decide to take some initiative upfront, you decide to be the leaders in your space, these risks are of course mitigated, but it also comes with a lot of opportunity, which means resource optimization, new products and services. It opens up new markets for you. It makes sure that so ESG is not just about investing money into doing something good for someone out there. It's about cost saving. It's about becoming more resilient for any kind of lack of resources in the near or long term. And of course, it enhances your reputation and brand image. Also leads to innovation and learning. So these are all of the opportunities which are very, very tangible for businesses, and of course something which could drive the ESG initiatives within a company. When we look at ESG policy and strategy of a company, we also then try to map their product, their services, their offerings with the ESG initiatives. And CSR is a very good example of that. So corporate social responsibility, although it's a regulatory requirement, a lot of companies don't understand that it could very well serve the purpose of ESG as well. And that's why it's very important to map ESG, corporate sustainability, CSR, and business strategy. So that was all the background about ESG. Just some example of how, what I just spoke about earlier, climate risks, are prevalent everywhere across the globe, and the kind of impact it has had so far. So I'll just talk about a few examples of how some companies have evolved over the last 5-6 years, the kind of benefits they've had, how they started their journey. So there is this very large multinational pharmaceutical company that we've been working with over the last 5 years. And so when we started working with them, they were amongst one of the mature companies who had been calculating they had been doing their greenhouse gas accounting under scope 1, 2. They hadn't really touched scope 3 until then. They had been publishing their sustainability report, since the last 10 years. So you would say that this company would be fairly evolved in the ESG space. But what we realized was, in fact, kudos to the company before I get to what we did. The management realized that instead of following the herd and going out in a public domain and announcing that we will be carbon neutral by 2040 or 2050, taking some random target, why don't we actually see what is it that we should be aiming for? And that's where science-based targets come in. So science-based targets basically help you understand what you should be aiming for, being in a certain sector, operating in certain geographies. Can you be carbon neutral by 2040? Is it over-ambitious? Is it achievable? What percentage should you be looking for on a year-on-year basis? So that's what we did for this company. We arrived at this target. So company then committed to reduce scope 1 and scope 2 emissions by 50% by financial year 2031, and taking 2021 as the base year. And they committed to reduce scope 3 by 12.3% by FY 2031. Now, science-based targets does not allow you to reduce emissions outside of your boundary, in the sense where you do not have a direct or indirect control. You cannot say that I will continue to do the damage, but I will go and buy carbon offsets from elsewhere and neutralize the impact I'm having. So SBTi does not allow you to do that. And hence, it is not easy to say, as per this standard, to say that I will be net zero by 2030. It's not that achievable. Now, once you start looking at this, the biggest learning I think we've had is we were able to map all the sources and sinks of carbon emissions within the system, be it within their boundary, which is scope 1 and scope 2 emissions, or outside of their boundary, which is scope 3. So upstream, downstream, all the sources were covered. Just by doing this detailed mapping of emissions, we were able to identify so many areas where the company need not even invest a penny to reduce their emissions. It was just by virtue of realization that they could spot certain leakages within the system, certain wastages that were happening, or unnecessary travel, transportation, energy bills, and all of this was brought down. And also, interestingly, some calculations were being, there were so many major errors in the calculations they had been doing over the last few years. They were double counting their emissions, they were double counting their electricity consumption because of various reasons. It brought down their entire emission base by 15% by doing nothing, by just realizing that, where all they could plug the gaps. So that, of course, was a huge encouragement for, motivation for the company, for the management to start looking into this more deeply. So we built a roadmap for them for the, short term, mid term, and long term. So in the short term, which was about 2 to 3 years, we told them, the initiatives they could take, how they could, with minimum investment, achieve maximum results, so the lowest hanging fruits. And then in the midterm, with some investment, what is the kind of results they could look at. We built that. We also evaluated certain technologies and solutions they could implement, did a cost-benefit analysis. And then in the long term, some innovative solutions they could invest in. So I'm also working closely with some global standards bodies, which help identify the carbon reduction potential of some innovative technologies that are coming in. So that really helped us bring it all together and build a sort of investment plan for carbon neutrality for the company over the next 10 years. And that, I think, has been a very, very fruitful exercise for us as well as for the company. So something I'm really proud of. We did energy audits. We identified energy ambassadors throughout the organization. And I was just talking to Indrajit earlier, and I was telling him how we have to change the terminology, ESG terminology, or customize it as per each stakeholder within a company. So the plant head would not understand what the corporate social, what the CSO would understand, the Chief Sustainability Officer. The CSO does not care so much about the financial part of it as a CFO does. So you have to customize your language, your solutions according to each of these stakeholders, because otherwise they wouldn't listen. They have no reason to listen unless you are solving their problem for them, right? So, so we did this Sustainability Ambassador Program, Energy Ambassador Programs, Women Ambassador Programs. I mean, there are several such things that we did just to get all of the employees on board for them to own this as an organization. And we saw tremendous results in the last 4 years that we've been working. This is a supplier sustainability policy that we built for the organization. Once an organization is kind of robust in its ESG framework, it can still not claim to be ESG compliant because there is a whole supply chain out there which is still untouched, which is still probably following all of the wrong practices, which the company is not aware of and is kind of encouraging by giving them business. So you cannot truly claim to be a green or a responsible company unless you're also looking at the entire value chain. And hence, for many of the companies which are now mature enough to have good systems internally, we are also looking at their value chain. So we are addressing their supply chain first. We are building sustainable supply chain programs, educating the suppliers, doing these frameworks to assess the supplier as per the scale of these suppliers and also the criticality of the product that they are supplying. Because you cannot have one size fits all sort of policy. Many of the suppliers would not even qualify, right? So you have to break it down, you have to simplify it for each of these different stakeholders, and that's what we try to achieve. And we cover basically, all the major global standards. So just some of the benefits, apart from all that we discussed right now, how it helped the company that we were working with, position itself as a responsible company globally. So their, as per Dow Jones Sustainability Index, their rank was significantly improved over the last 3 years. Then CDP, they were rated as C- when we started working with them, and they finally could change their score to B and this time to A-. Then water security and supply chain, similar kind of improvements. Then by CRISIL, they were ranked as #1 company in the pharma sector. And, similarly, other recognitions and awards as well. So, it's not just tangible benefits, it's also intangible benefits that we need to take into account. So any questions I'd be happy to answer if I have already surpassed my time limit. Sorry about that.
Thank you, Anu. That was a wonderful discussion around, I think we've surpassed the stage where prevention is a way to control the disaster that is coming through climate change. And we need to work on mitigation and adaptation. And also thank you for covering Scope 3 and other emissions. And with this, we come to our next speaker, Indrajit, who's the sustainability lead at CBRE. I remember our first conversation where he spoke about Patagonia and other companies which adhere to sustainability in the true sense of the term. So over to you, Indrajit.
Thank you so much, Kirti. And thanks, Anu, for that wonderful introduction to ESG. I'll probably just continue from where Anu left off, but just briefly for everyone else. My name is Indrajit Shaw, and I work for CBRE. I lead the energy and sustainability for CBRE's largest pharma client globally in the APAC, China, and Japan region. So starting off from where Anu left off, I think one of the first things I want to ask this group here is a very simple question which will help you understand why we are going to talk about reporting later on. Could you venture a guess of how much plastic pollution is produced from the likes of all the organizations that we have representation here, all entities which are involved in research, in any kind of, pharma, manufacturing, or research development. Any guesses? What is the volume of plastic waste that we produce? Please feel free to just, quote the most relevant number that comes to your mind. I think we have got a few mics, or you can just, voice out your response. Any numbers that I can get? Sorry?
It's in tons only.
Yes, it's in tons. And quite a few at that. Any numbers, please? Whatever comes to your mind. Anybody? Yeah. Sir?
Be around 1,000 metric tons per day worldwide.
Uh-huh. So 1,000 would be around 365,000 tons per annum. Yeah. Any other numbers? Okay. So the answer is 5.5 million metric tons. Okay. That's the amount of plastic waste that goes out from the activities that we are doing and, which you are a part of. And just to put it in context, this is equivalent to 1/10 the weight of the Great Wall of China, which is one of the heaviest objects on Earth, or about 48,000 Boeing 747 payloads. That's the kind of plastic that we are talking about. But that also underscores the importance of identifying why reporting is important, because this helps us understand the magnitude of the problem. And that's what I want to talk about for the next few minutes. One of the best ways to do this is, you all are EHS or R&D professionals, so you're aware of the value of quantification. The point is, how do we take that quantification and put it in a framework which is standardized globally so everybody can understand it in the same way? And the reason this is important is because you might be thinking of managing your environmental or social impact in one way, somebody else might be thinking differently. But unless we have a shared understanding, you are going to consistently see the kind of debates, arguments, criticisms that we see around ESG in the world today. So that is one key message that I would like to share with this group, is the reason we need to report is because we need to have a shared common understanding using the standards that we have got, like a GRI or a CDP, so that we together as a globe, and we have only one at that, can do something about it. Okay. So coming back to some of the ways of doing it, Anu briefly mentioned about TCFD. TCFD is actually one of the ways to look at your strategy, where we talk about risks and opportunities, and the financials, where we talk about your profit and loss statement, your cash flow, and your balance sheet. And the significance of this is, if we are to continue doing the kind of research that we want, we would need to have funding for that. At the same time, we also need to be aware that the research that we are doing results in effluents, in gases, and other ways of, or pollutants, which are going out into the environment. So on the one hand, we look at the environmental impact of what we are doing while we continue to create impact in industry. On the other hand, we ensure that we understand how our finances are affected because of that. So TCFD is good for you if you want to link your research work with the risks that are out there. For example, if you are working in Hyderabad and your company produces a lot of effluents, it might lead to what we call a transition risk, where it pollutes the water bodies in the city and which in turn results in microbial resistance to antibiotics. And we have a separate session on that later on in the day. But the idea is this helps you understand why you have a role to play when you are doing your research in ensuring that it does not impact our environment. But at the same time, your CFO, to Anu's point again, is interested in the financial impact of these risks, not just from a compliance perspective, but also from a company growth perspective. And that's one of the things that we will bring up during our roundtable, is how do we go from this approach, predominantly looking at just focusing on the license to operate, the legislative piece, to the cost of doing business, where it is incorporated in what we are doing. The next framework that I want to talk about is called integrated reporting. That actually takes the TCFD one step further, where we are talking about 6 different forms of capital. So we have talked strategy, we have talked finance. But now we are talking about all the other things that are part of this strategy and finance, namely the human capital, the intellectual capital, the social capital, the natural capital, and of course, financial and I think the financial capital, manufacturing capital. Okay, so these are the 6 things that we would like to cover as part of the integrated reporting framework. Now, what this does is from a very 10,000 feet level of strategy, we are now looking at specific areas that we need to address. In a wet lab context, the relevance is you now need to look at what is the amount of waste from the products that you are producing. What is the impact on the people who are producing those products from a health perspective, from a mental and physical health perspective, from an ecosystem perspective? Are we provided the necessary support? Are we made aware for the new people who are coming in? Of course, the people who are experienced would know what needs to be done because they have been in the industry. But when you are hiring new people, are they aware of how we are measuring the impact? That's where the social and the human capital comes in. So if you want to go down one step further, where you are looking at the various levels of strategy, then you may want to bring in integrated reporting. The third is a lot broader, which is GRI, Global Reporting Initiative. GRI was one of the earliest reporting frameworks starting in 1997, and it actually has the broadest ambit of coverage in terms of reporting. Now, this is good for organizations which are a little more mature because it has almost 91 parameters across economic, social, and environmental. That helps you understand in further granularity which are the specific areas that you want to cover. And that again would be one of the things that we'll talk about during the roundtable. So we go from a very high level understanding to further levels of granularity. And it is up to each one of you in this room to take away what are those specific metrics, whether in economic, whether in social, or in environmental, that you want to take away to implement in your organization. Because while we do, what is important is what we show to the world, because that is how we are perceived. So one of the key reasons why we need to report is to improve the perception that other stakeholders outside the company have of us. So from that perspective, if you are reporting under the GRI framework, it gives you global recognition as an organization which is using a standardized accepted framework. So that is the key message that I want to end my note with, is to say that reporting for reporting's sake is not what we need to aim for. Filling up a few pages does not take a lot of effort, especially for us in EHS and research, who are used to reading and writing a lot. What is important for us is to make sure that the numbers and the qualitative parameters that come out are aligned to the global standards that are out there, such as a CDP or a GRI or a TCFD, so that other people understand how we are measuring our environmental, social, and economic impact. So it is about coming to a common understanding as we grow within the organization and as our organization grows within the industry and as industries expand, cutting across into each other. It is more and more important to create a shared understanding of what ESG is and what ESG is not, and use that understanding to identify what are the specific things that you want to report under so that your organization can be perceived correctly by the stakeholders at large. Thank you so much. I will hand over to Manish to talk about some of the things around the ESG spectrum on the technology side.
Thank you, Indrajit. I think we have a ESG equivalent of the legal dictum that justice should not only be done, but also appear to be done. So, well spoken. Can we have this display, please? Now, yes, Manish, sir, he's the... I'll let you introduce yourself.
Good afternoon, and toughest time of the day. Lunch we had just about an hour back. For me, standing here itself is difficult. I'm sure it's very difficult sitting there and listening to all the jargons, all the bhashan that we are giving, right? So, sorry about that to start with, right? I'm part of SAP. My name is Manish, and SAP is one of the oldest technology companies working in the ERP space for almost last 50 years. In fact, earlier this year, we celebrate our 50th year of existence. And one of the very few companies coming from Europe and still relevant. Most of the companies, technology companies, come from US, and so we're proud that we're still relevant, being 50 years old in the industry. And I just have a few slides as placeholders just to talk about, from a technology standpoint, from SAP standpoint, what do we think? What can be done, how it can be done, and why should it be done, right? So I'll just go back to the start of the slide, which is one of our global vice presidents. So one interesting thing that we have. So which one is the? All right, okay, thank you. So SAP has a sustainability vertical. That's very important because unless you have dedicated people in that organization doing that work, nobody's accountable, right? So we have a dedicated team in sustainability, how we are going to build up that part of the technology, right? So in this, if you see, we have something called as economics, right? And we've highlighted the first three letters, ECO. A lot of people would have guessed it by now, but ECO actually stands for ecology, right? So it's an environmental inclusion in your financials. We were just having a discussion around the capitalism. So profit is, revenue is everything. When you start a company, start a business. And we have included eco in there to make sure that there is subtle introduction of sustainability in the way we do our businesses, right? So what we have done is we have actually sort of summarized a few things, and I'll take you through 2 or 3 slides. One is, what are the actions to take, right? So at a broader sustainability level, right? So why should I do sustainability? And is it a loss-making initiatives inside the organization? Itna paisa kyun kharch karu? Why? I mean, if I start my business, I will have the same questions. And every organization has to, as I said, is created for the purpose of creating wealth, creating profit, creating revenues, right? But what we've said is, since it is becoming important, and I just remember this, the planet Earth doesn't belong to us anymore. You and me don't own the planet. Take a guess who owns the planet Earth. Anybody? almost close. Yeah. So our children or our pillalus or our grandchildren, right, are Manamadu. If I use the right words? Yeah, Manamadu, right? So they are the owners of this. They don't know about it as yet, right? So it's our duty to give this planet in that shape back to them, right? Irrespective if we create businesses or we don't. So in an organization, you will have business transformation and then there will be a sustainability initiatives, right? The end objective is to create sustainability in such a way that it is visible to everybody within the organization, also to the consumer or the customer of yours, right? That's how the world is moving towards, right? And these are certain steps that we have clearly highlighted, some of them at the strategic level, and then some of them at very operational levels, right? I'll share the slides later with you, but I just want to bring out certain elements of why sustainability. And ESG is a sort of a, what do you call a synonym for sustainability, and that's why I wanted to talk about this. Another thing that I thought I'll bring up over here is, certain important numbers here, right? So first one, if you look at this one, customers, and especially in the generation, at least lesser than mine, they're very categorical in what they're trying to buy and use, right? If you give me an option or give that person an option to buy a toothpaste which is carbon neutral versus the one which is, has a high carbon emission index, they will buy the first one. Preferences are changing, and this is a global number. 79% of buyers are actually changing their preferences. So if buyers are changing their preferences, people who are making it have to change it, right? Because it's a consumer-driven business at the end of the day. Investors, very important aspect. ESG reporting will be very helpful in this aspect as well. A lot of investors, before they invest in startups, in companies, and this is across companies, right? So it could be companies listed on the stock exchanges. There could be companies who are startups. 50% of investors are looking at sustainable companies to invest in. So by default, if you are starting your company and if it is not sustainable, you will not find investors, right? The third, employees. You and me are part of companies. While we have a view, but a lot of this is changing globally, right? So people are joining only those companies which are actually have ESG built in part of their policies, right? And ESG there is a huge aspect of S, which is a social element, and social people are included. So I'll give you some examples in terms of what gets reported, what are some of the metrics that gets taken care of. And regulators, we spoke about it. So, one of the foremost questions that I had when I started researching on ESG is, what do I report? Is there a standard available? Yes, there are at least 600 standards available. Now that is a dichotomy, right? There cannot be 600 standards available. So some of this will crystallize. We will come to a situation in the future where this will reduce. But as of now, as we speak, every country has its own standards. Then there are regulatory bodies that they have their own standards, right? Yeah. I'm sorry?
Indian global.
Yeah. India also has certain standards. BR research standards is already there. Then there are global, so this 600 is not India standards, but total India would at least have 20-25 minimum, right? So you have pollution control board standards, you have water regulatory standards, etc. So these are all subsets of standards, and globally you have almost 600 such standards. So if I'm a company and I'm present in 10 countries, I don't know what to report and how to report. It's very difficult, right? Tough part, right? Tough part is, so just made it simple in terms of what companies should do in terms of ESG, right? So the first and foremost is to record it, right? Because unless you record it, you will not be able to report it. And unless you report it, you will not be able to act on it, right? And recording, while, for most of us in our Indian context is just filling up the Excel sheets with whatever we know. That's not really the recording aspect that we are talking from a standards perspective, because this will be audited. Whatever is being recorded will be audited in the future. So just like you have financial auditing right now, there will be ESG auditing in place as well. So the idea is to make sure it is authentic data which is recorded, right? And what to record is also a problem, right? Because let's say, for example, I'm a pharma company. I create a lot of bulk drugs. I also have OTC products, right? So while bulk drugs, I have a very different level of carbon emissions. For consumer products, by the time the product reaches the counter or the pharma store, there is too much of carbon that has already been used up to provide that to the consumer on the ground. And today you are not able to count it at all. You're not able to record it, you're not able to account for it, you will not be able to take action on it, right? So there are still, these are early days for some of the companies, some of the areas, some of the verticals. How do I really record it, right? Some of the companies will say, okay, pull up that entire spend on freight, divide it by the number of SKUs, and put that across, right? So what is happening is at every level of your manufacturing process, every level, you will have to record the emissions or ESG. So, and ESG, as already pointed out, it is not just the environmental part, it's also the social part. So, interestingly, last year, one of the countries said, I don't have any carbon emissions at all. One of the largest GDPs of the world. And the question came back, so where do you manufacture? I manufacture in China. So the emissions are happening in China. That's not the right way, right? I mean, even if you're the leader in the world, you can't use such language, right? And we all know, I'm sure this, you guys would have followed it up as well, right? So record, report, act, that is fundamental to ESG reporting. 600 standards going to crystallize. You will have certain basic standards to start with. Not all the companies are required to report ESG right now, but companies have started to look at it because it is not going to be a paradigm shift, right? And paradigm shift, I just wanted one small exercise. How many right-handers in this room? Any left-handers?
I'm ambidextrous.
You are? Yes. Oh, wow. Okay. So, okay, this is, you guys don't have the paper. So whoever has a paper on the table, and all the right-handers, just pick up the pen or the pencil that you have, and you have a paper in front of you, and write your name on the paper with your right hand. Your name, yeah, your right hand. Right hand. You're lefty? No, right? Okay. I just have some extra soft collar for the left-handers, by the way. Yeah? The best left-handers that I like is Saurav Ganguly. What a glance through the offside, right? I mean, cover drives. You guys have written? Give you 5 more seconds. I know we all have long names in Telangana, so please feel free to write your longest name possible. Okay, shift the pencil back to your left hand and write your name again with your left hand now. And I'm hoping nobody's cheating here. I know you guys want more time. I'll give you 10 seconds more. It's not easy to write with the left hand. You are? Yeah. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. Extra points for you, actually. So, you done? Anybody still waiting? All right. Compare the both the names that you have written. Does it sound different, difficult, uncomfortable, right? It does. I mean, ESG sustainability is going to be difficult. It is going to be challenging. It's a paradigm change for all of us. None of us is going to be able to do it on day 1 or day 0. Okay? Most of us will not be able to do it in the first 365 days. It will take, and that's why the first slide we had was it's a journey and not a destination. So be ready for the tough world, okay? Because it has to come from inside, whether you do it at home and you bring the same person into your organization to talk about ESG, to talk about sustainability, right? I write very bad with my left hand, okay? I tried it at home. I don't know how you guys have written it. Just save this paper to show it to your family as well, right? Because this was the first time you actually started to write with left hand, right? It is as difficult as when you started to write with your right hand when you were 3 years old. Okay? So it is going to be difficult, it is going to be challenging, but we know 40 years later you guys are doing so well. Okay, so it's not going to take 40 years to do well in ESG. It might just take anywhere between 1 to 5 years. But I just thought it's going to be challenging. Let's accept it, right? I'll end my first session here. Any questions, anything, any comments? Happy to take that.
No, you have said about some standards are there.
Yeah.
Then any prevailing standard number?
These are all prevailing standards.
Which is the most...
That's a tough question to answer, right? So everybody will have its own way of looking at it. If I am a purely company based in India, operating in India, marketing in India, I have a different way to look and think. If I am an organization which is contract manufacturing for global, so this is an interesting point. Just like the country said, right, I'm not doing any emissions because I'm not manufacturing anything. A lot of companies started doing the same thing. I'm not manufacturing anything at all. I have suppliers doing it. I have contract manufacturers doing it. So ESG bodies came back and said, no, we're going to leave you like that. Okay, the suppliers have to be part of the ESG reporting, right? So if you're supplying to any American companies, for example, then there will be standards that you will have to follow by default. You can't escape that. So again, as I said, there are 600 standards right now, more than of them, and it's evolving. But someday I think we will, just like you have account.
They are not regulated, 600 bodies?
These are all regulated stuff. So as I said, India has its own regulatory.
That is top 10.
Yeah, so what I think
Just
what
like
we should do,
environmental, we have 14,000, 18,000 on safety.
if I were you, I will do the following thing. I will make sure that I capture and record everything, right? So the data should be there, okay, for recording purposes, for reporting purposes. Now, anybody comes and asks me, please show it in this format, no problem, take it in this format. If show me in Y format, no problem, it is there, right? The entire, I'm sorry?
Any ISO standards?
There are a lot of standards. I actually forgot to show you some examples, right? This is interesting. So, all right, my favorite slide here because, look at this. This is GRI reporting standards, okay? And the biggest part where we actually have ignored in all our financial reporting so far is the social part of it. So ESG, S stands for social, as you guys are aware. It plays a very important role. Gender representation in management, median workforce age, pay equality, wage levels, level of CEO compensations, training expenditure. Imagine the kind of importance social also has as part of ESG reporting. And then, of course, governance, all of this is fair. Environmental, we spoke about emissions, scope 1, scope 2. There is an element of, I think this is anyway the current financial reporting that already happens. Right? So this will become part of GRI or all the ESG reporting by default. Okay. So yeah, but interesting, right? I never thought that the wage level will become such an important part of disclosures. Right?
But surprising is the number of corruption incidents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Surprising.
Yeah, right? Yeah, it is.
In the governance.
Yes, it is. So, when people, my understanding when I started ESG, just to read and understand was governance means just governing this entire ES part of things. Actually, governance is essentially how your organization is governed. Key metrics around that, right? So, corruption, training on anti-corruption. So, you'll be surprised. I can show you some of our trainings that happened as SAP. See, we are already listed on German DAX as well as NYSE. So the amount of trainings that we have to go through and sign off is like 8 to 10 mandatory trainings for us. Anti-corruption, non-disclosures, etc., etc., etc. These are all mandatory stuff, right?
Non-disclosure
Yes.
training is always there in pharma companies.
Yes.
But training on corruption, anti-corruption,
Nahi hai na?
is surprising.
Yeah, exactly. So the reason these are all there also is in terms of, are the organizations creating enough awareness within the employees? Because employees come back and say, yaar, mujhe to pata nahi tha. But that pata nahi tha is not longer going to be relevant when it comes to ESG reporting. right? So I'm just giving some examples in terms of how SAP has interpreted ESG reporting. Okay. Yes, sir.
I just have one.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I mean, from out of the 600 standards or whatever the standards that are relevant to our country, is there any governance or a body who does the compliance or adherence part of these standards as a part of audits, or where are these reports are being cascaded across the organization?
Yes. I'll just give one small example, and maybe Indrajit, you can help me out further elaborate this. SEBI has currently mandated about, I think, 1,000 top companies in India to report ESG. So, and it's in the BRSR standards, right? Next 2-3 years, it will be mandate for everybody, right? So there is SEBI, which is essentially the submission body, right? Then there are people, consultants, and Anu belongs to one or runs one of those companies which helps out companies do this as well. And maybe Indrajit, if you want to help me out.
Yeah, so to your question, see, right now what's happening is while we have got a lot of reporting standards, okay, the ones that we talked about or Manish mentioned, these are mostly peer reviewed. So if you're saying, is there a body globally which is doing it? To my knowledge, there isn't. Yeah. Now, is there a body in country? What's happening is, if you look at some of the latest regulations, the SEC in the US, the European Commission, they are coming up with guidelines for companies to mandatorily report beyond a certain threshold. Okay, so that is how that ecosystem is now evolving. But to your point, I think the ESG space is still in a large part self-regulated.
Correct. Yeah.
And just to add to that, so while there are no regulatory bodies doing a third-party audit as such, there are certification bodies which are doing this, or assurance providers. Like the Big Fours, they are all doing assurance of a sustainability report. Then you have certification bodies providing this rating or certification on reporting. Then you have the disclosures, which are very specific. So like the carbon disclosure program that I was talking about, it does not cover the entire gamut of ESG, but a large part of the climate or water related parameters. And then you have DJSI, which is again an ESG disclosure and rating mechanism. And that has a very, very wide scope. They also give a rating to companies, which they invite to disclose under DJSI.
So can I understand in a way that this 600 number, 600 plus or 600 number, is not exactly a standard but a policy, and that is flexible across the organization?
Yeah, I think what we will do is, when we start the roundtable, we will actually address, some of the questions that you have. And I would like to definitely touch upon that, because that's exactly the point of this discussion today. Manish, if you want to.
No, actually, I'm done. And since you have been a very good audience, I wanted to ask you some nice questions. This is the PPT. Oh my God. Yeah, that's okay. Put it in the PPT. And that's it. Thank you. This will work. Where is it? Okay. Sure. Nice. All right. So, no, nothing related to ESG or anything. I just thought bring in a little bit of entertainment, since we all are part of the Tollywood, right? So, yeah. Any guesses who this person is? I will not give any clues to start with. Anybody who can guess this?
Definitely not you, I guess.
Of course not. This is a more handsome looking person. All right. Oh.
Superstar Krishna.
No. Come on, guys. No. I mean, you just don't keep guessing, right? I mean, I need you to just tell me, really you feel it is Mahesh Babu? It is? It is Prabhas. Yes. You got it right. Fantastic. Thank you. Who is the actor in this? Venkatesh. No, I'm talking about this guy.
That is Rana Raghubati.
Close, not too much. No, this is Mahesh Babu, by the way. Somebody said Mahesh Babu was you. This is Mahesh Babu. Who is this one? Sorry?
Rajkumar?
No. Okay, not from Tollywood. No. Actor here. It is entertainment industry. He's the same person here.
Kishore Kumar.
Kishore Kumar.
Yeah, exactly. So that's his childhood photo. Guess which photo is this? How can Kishore Kumar have a photo like this?
Kishore Kumar can have any kind of photo.
I know, but I mean, Kishore Kumar in an avatar where he's garlanded, it cannot be like this. It's in one of his movies where he actually was playing a male and a female role, and the female was, said, "वो तो मर गई है मेरी मम्मी," तो मम्मी का photo किशोर कुमार का ही photo लगा हुआ था. Right? So that's it from my side. Thank you. Any questions on these three? Just joking.
Can we map this with ESG?
I'm sorry.
Can we map this with ESG?
That was absolutely nice. Wait, candy is free. You deserve a chocolate from my end. I should get it for
What was
you.
the comment? Missed that.
The comment was candy for him. I said candy is anyways free for all of us. Indrajit, over to you. Let's.
Thank you.
Let's start.
Before I start, Kirti, how are we doing on time?
Very
How long
bad,
do we have?
but I think
We started at 2:40. We are at 3:45. Half an hour, like 20 minutes late, but still
Okay.
we can.
Sure. So by what time should we close?
4:30 should be.
4:30. Okay, great. Wonderful. Entertaining session. So without further ado, what I'll do is I'll mention some housekeeping rules and then we'll get going. First off, we have got the toilets just outside opposite the room to the left and right. What I would request also is for all of you, if you may please turn your name badges so that everybody else can see everybody's name so we can understand where we are from. The session will be for about 40 minutes, and the key objective will be twofold. One is, at an individual level, all of us here, what are the key 2 or 3 things that we can take away in terms of measuring metrics from an economic, social, and environmental perspective is something that, let's try and see if we can identify some of those which are relevant to most of us. From a more shared perspective, I think it would be good if we can create a common understanding of what are the key strands of ESG that are relevant for wet labs and for our individual organizations that we can take away with. The structure of the session will be in 2 parts. In the first 20 minutes, we will be talking about ESG as a whole, and within that focusing predominantly on the social and the governance part to identify what are the key things that you would like to see in your organizations. And the second part will be more focused around the energy, water, and waste part to understand from that aspect what are the specific areas that you would like to see addressed in your organizations and learn more about. What I would request is the success of this event will be based on how participative we are. It's not for us to talk about, but really for the group to contribute. So I would kindly request all of you to please put in your thoughts and feel free to share your own anecdotes or your experiences around that. That's what we are trying to bring in. And at the end of it, we will try to summarize to understand if there's a common sense on what are the key strands that we want to take forward. So with that, what I would like to start off with was one of the things that was mentioned earlier during the discussion. I think one of the gentlemen mentioned about the training on corruption or anti-corruption, right? And that forms a very key part of the social metrics that we have in ESG reporting. What I would like to understand from the group here is what are the current practices that you have in your organizations? What kind of trainings are you doing to make sure that not only the leadership but also the teams on the ground are able to understand the impact of ethical behavior and business ethics in a R&D environment? Yes, please, sir.
Yeah, I just.
Can we have the mic over?
I think I am.
Yeah, please. Wonderful. Thank you. Makes life easier.
So at our organization, we have a corporate drive on business ethics.
So can I just request anybody who's speaking, please mention the name of the organization and yourself so that everybody else is aware that would be
Sure, okay. So I am Shankar Vinjamuri. I come from International Flavors and Fragrances, which is Danisco India Private Limited in India. So I lead the EHS there. And can I go ahead to the practice?
Absolutely.
Here at our organization, we have business ethics and ethics as a module for us and as a core value of the organization, wherein right from the level of board of directors to the level of the new employee who joined in the organization shall undergo a detailed training on an annual basis and as a part of onboarding also. And we will have a quiz and other things online, wherein we will have to comply to continue for the next year. And this is a part of our incremental assessment too. So that's how the control is.
Okay, that's great. And I think there are quite a few organizations, who are relatively young in their journey. I would like to hear from them as well if they have, any initiatives that they are doing around this. Any thoughts from the group here?
Hi, you want me to do that?
Please.
So, what we are doing at SAP also, again, we are a multi-country organization. What we are doing is two things. One is, of course, the tech aspect of it, but outside that, we do, as an exemplar. So, for example, I told you about those 8 or 9 certifications, right? That each one of us has to do it. It's mandated. In fact, if people don't do it, there's a regular follow-up directly from the COO's office, right? That's how important it is. That's how importance the organization gives it. Then there are a lot of things that SAP does on its own, where we are looking at some reduction in emissions, right? We use a lot of data centers as well. In Germany, in fact, in our corporate headquarters, we have now introduced a lot of electric vehicles. So we're trying to control the amount of emission that happens because of ICE engines or combustion engines. So a few interesting things that we are doing within the organization. There are certifications, there are trainings. Plus we are creating our own technology as well around it, which we will be selling on top of these ERP.
Okay.
So yeah, just thought I'll share if there are certain interesting things that other organizations are doing.
So in fact, on the point of ERP, I'm sure the R&D that you do, a lot of the data gets captured, right? So at this stage, could any of you, or would you like to speak about what is the kind of data that you're capturing, especially around your emissions or, your social aspects in terms of employee welfare, wellness, diversity, and so on? Anybody, if you may, please.
And you may not be doing it for ESG reasons. You may be doing it for other reasons.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So.
Any thoughts from the team here? Yes, sir, Mr. Raju, yeah.
You are going for a greenfield you are maybe for green building reportedly nowadays we are going for brick and mortar out of dust is evolving during the construction work. But right now there are several ways of reducing the dust and during the construction and other ways but there are several ways instead of brick and mortar now it is going for pre-engineered vehicles. We design it in a separate way and this construction is also very fast and the quality is also improving and we can reduce a lot of time during project.
Right.
And plus we can change our whenever we want. Because steel you can cut down in any time and you can change our inside interiors also. But lot of since last 3 years there is a lot of change in the designs, especially from green building concept and environmental this thing and safety wise also. Here I think the safety is not like ESG, but safety is one of the priority in construction.
Okay. So let me ask you, sir, in terms of the safety norms, and you mentioned that there were design changes. What was the key driver for you to move to green buildings? I mean, why did biologically, which has been in the industry for more than 70 years, why did it decide to go for green buildings?
Yes, that is a very good question, because earlier there were very conventional buildings and they are going for old designs and all, based on their old theme, I don't know, but the concepts are evolving, and the way you are recruiting consultants or experts like Anu and all, and you are getting someone's inputs, and in the same way you are also saving the cost also. And like the green buildings, you are talking to Godrej, CA Center, and you are also going, our MD also very much interested to initiate those, from the top management also, they are very much interested to do all this back-end work, and they are also giving the thought process why you are going for this, why you have to change, how to change and all. But even water also, water, soil, and even like construction safety, there are so many like evolving designs. So that this we are taking new expert from the green building council.
Okay.
And
so you're also using IGBC,
yes.
standards.
And there are people they have studied abroad and came back, and they have started their own consulting.
Right.
They are giving a lot of thoughts in that.
And in fact, this is again a question to the group here. Do you see this kind of management interest in your organizations? What's been your experiences? Would any of you like to share? Has there been any discussions? EHS plus. I think I would really appreciate if you can volunteer your thoughts on whether there have been any discussion in this regard, or you think that this is just a cost imperative.
So I could.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
In my company, we have a certified IGBC platinum model. So in that perspective, actually the management has decided to put a green building to conserve the energy sources. So they have taken the consideration, they prepared the cost financial figures and they compared. So this will reduce this much of energies, and we can conserve the natural resources. So the concept has taken. So they figure it out.
And when you say natural resources, what kind of natural resources are taken into consideration?
So solar, for example, I can say solar. So we have solar power panels. So on the rooftop, so we generate the power source from the solar, and we use the natural lighting instead of lighting and all. We use a natural solar light for illuminating the buildings.
Right.
So that is the one concept. And apart from that, water consumption. So whatever the water we are using, the minimal usage of water. So whenever there is a sensors is available, so whenever we use the hand, the water will come out. And the water regeneration, whatever the recycling of water also we are looking for. So now we have a common treatment facility. So at our IKB, so we are sending those water. So those water also we are looking to recycle and reuse it.
I'm curious, on this water piece. So this is something that people view very subjectively. I mean, I might be comfortable with the flow of water. Somebody else might say, it's too less. So, in any other organizations who might have implemented similar initiatives, what has been the thinking of the employees, even with your organization, as I said? What's been the employee feedback like? Are people okay with this? Do you do any kind of special trainings or awareness sessions or education sessions? How do you ensure that the changes that you are bringing in, people buy into these changes?
So actually, the construction itself, they consider these things. So people adapted to the structure.
Right. So what you're saying is that the adoption by people is after we have implemented the solutions, right? So essentially you don't really have an option but to adopt it. Yeah? So, and this actually is one point that again I want to throw up to the audience is, there is one approach where we mandate that you have to do this. There's another approach where we encourage people to take it up and then we do the implementation. Has there been any example in your organizations where you might have done that? Yes, sir.
Yeah, so this I started working with our scientists who generate a lot of process effluents in the process of R&D, and especially with the water. So what we did collectively is to find out a way of not just throwing out the processed water directly into the ETP. Instead, is there any way that we can neutralize and then instead of ETP putting into STP and then reuse it for either gardening and all, and we have succeeded in it. That's one aspect. And moving forward, my background is also I'm a scientist turned EHS, so that's where the connect happened.
Wonderful. So, and in fact, this point that you make, I understand that the changing from an environment where we are simply throwing out processed water to reusing the water can lead to almost a 20 to 30% reduction in water usage.
Exactly.
So I think point well made.
60%.
Wonderful.
Even
so, and sir, any experiences that you would like to share around that?
Same thing, we are using that, we are throwing it in ETP, we are reusing it. And we are using it for gardening, for cleaning, these type of purposes.
Rainwater.
Right. So then, that begs a point. Can this be one of the metrics that we use to report, saying that this is the level of water usage that we are doing, and these are the initiatives that we are bringing in to make sure that our water reduction is maximized. And to that point, is there an opportunity to encourage people like yourself, to bring more people into that similar fold of thinking?
Indeed, we have a green team at our organization, and we have representation from each BU. The BU leader himself is the green team driver in his team. So all, again, the initiatives are not like continuous or perpetual kind of thing. Like I say that if I start using this processed water and it will take ages for me to continue.
Right.
It's not like that. There are time frames, there are timelines, and given a scenario, last year we have done water conservation, this year what? What is the innovative approach?
So there's a continuous improvement approach that you bring to the conservation measures, right?
And what triggers these targets? Like how do you set the targets for yourself? How do you cascade it down to each of the
Okay, based on, actually we have the ESG driver accountability. So based on the ESG reports that we get from other sites. So I take up what improvement that I can do at our site, which will compete with the other site, and that's how we set the targets.
Got it.
I wanted to give an example. We were working with Tata Group, Titan in fact. So Tata Group, if you guys are familiar, is very high on sustainability. Right? So most of their group companies are already in the level 3, level 4 of sustainability. Right? So in fact, one of the group companies has already deployed 4-5 years back some of these solutions. Titan, in their corporate office, they have removed air conditioning in Bangalore.
Wow.
Right? Now you'll ask me what is the option that they've given to the employees, right? They use water to cool, and then there are fans, okay, to bring that cooled air into
Convection.
each room. Yeah. And I found it so impressive. Luckily, it is Bangalore. You can do it because the weather doesn't turn in so hot, right? But I mean, not everybody does it. But I've seen the Tata Group taking some very interesting initiatives like these.
That's a very relevant point you mentioned, because if you look at Mughal architecture, for example, they used to use this concept. I went to one of the tourist places where I saw that between two walls, they would have a system where water would flow. And it would not be visible, so the aesthetics was not impacted.
Right.
But because of that flow, the mean temperature in the space would be substantially lowered.
Yeah.
And then there was a very nice channel through which the water was moved down to the pumping area and then moved back again. So I think, initiatives like these have been around for quite some time. The question is, how far are we willing to adopt them despite the initial cost that might be there? So, just going back to the point of the green team that, I think Shankar mentioned. So, sir, you're from Loris Labs. Have you had any experience on creating similar teams in your organization?
It is in process now.
Okay.
Management is recently recruited to officers, so they are in process to plan the teams and everything.
Okay. And what was the driving force? Why did the management suddenly decide to do this?
And we proposed, our property use is proposed around 4 years back. So finally we got the approval from last year on that. So we started management also thinking that what is the importance of this ESG work. So that's the issue. It is under process now.
Okay, wonderful. Any other examples of green teams or initiatives where we are engaging the associates you from United States Pharmacopoeia? Do you have any thoughts around that?
I am Sharad, USP. So I am leading EHS over there. Yeah, so coming to the ESG program at USPDA is like we are told, so just we have started working. It's like because of the novelties. So because they asked us, we are the supplier, one of the supplier of the novelties. So we captured by them. So then we have started. So what is ESG? Though we report many things, like as part of pollution of our things, and apart from that, we do measure many things. But it's like the record keeping. It's not into the. We are not looking into things where we need to reduce emissions. We are not looking because we are an R&D facility.
Got it.
So maybe the quantities what we generate, what we emit, it is very less. That could be the one of the reasons.
So are there any specific metrics that you are asked by Novartis to report as part of their reporting, because their scope 3 would be your in-house emission, right? So from that perspective, are there any specific metrics that you are reporting on?
We comes under third scope, right? Scope 3 emissions.
Yes.
Yeah, so just we have started. Like we found a green score globally. So from India side, that's why I'm part of that. So it has come to our global, like in our US office. So from India side, so I need to do that data. Like the emissions, indoor air quality measurement, like carbon dioxide, carbon monoxide, VOC levels. And we are measuring that. So now we need to give this data, record keeping data to them. And apart from that, particulate matter data, so PM1, 2.5, 4, 10.
Okay.
So apart from PCP, what they ask, apart from this we are doing it.
And do you also need to report any data along, how you are engaging associates or how you are training associates so they ensure compliance, that it's not just one person like a Sharad who is reporting, but also the entire team, that they are aware. Any metrics around that you've been thinking about?
Yeah, see, like R&D units, what we don't have a good team, not even a good, I can't say good, so we don't have a big team, like ESS professionals. One EHS professional will be there, another lab teams like R&D scientists, so they are part of the EHS team. They could be lab safety officers or waste disposal officers, directly helps us. So they are under dual roles.
Okay, so then the next question then is, do you see a relevance of people like Anu coming in and, because you don't have a specialized ESG team, coming in and specifically looking at your current way of working, whether it's your emissions, whether it's your social standards, or whether it's your governance. Do you see value in bringing in external parties to look at these, or do you think it is more effectively done in-house?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, we need a consultant. We are looking into.
And if you were to get a consultant, what would be the specific areas that you as a company would want to look at?
So it's not from site specific, it's like globally specific. So we do occupy, so US we have a big office, India, China. So like 3 countries globally we do.
So from a more metrics, qualitative or quantitative, what are the key areas that you would like them to come in and assess? If I were to be a little more specific, is it that you would like them to focus on, let's say, the gender parity, or if I look at the social perspective, or would you prefer them to look at the wellness areas, what are the initiatives that could be done, or maybe volunteering on CSR time? So are there specific areas that you would want to look at?
Yeah, so more or less, so we are following this, like wellness activities are there. And recently we have initiated this DEIB activity.
What is DIB?
So diversity, equality and belonging. Inclusive belonging. Like, so each department should have one women employee, at least one. Right? So not only that, it's like social governance. So these things we initiated recently, maybe a year back or 1 year back.
Okay.
The things are going on, but it's not exactly what we can't say like it's part of years.
Okay.
Somewhere or other, yes.
But that's fine. Like Anu said, I think, see, irrespective of the reasons, I think one of the things that we would like to understand from the participants here is, irrespective of why you are doing it, we would like to hear from you what you are doing, and then we could probably use some of these shared learnings to understand what makes sense for your organization versus others. So, I really appreciate the fact that you mentioned about the belonging part. Typically in social initiatives, we talk about diversity, equality, and inclusion. But belonging is something that I think you've made a very good point about, and extending it to beyond your work, even for your family. I think one of the things that we see happening is, with more and more hours being put into work, we spend less and less hours with family. So that association with family also takes a hit. So are there any examples in any of your organizations where you try to assess this part of employees' well-being on how much time they are spending in organizations? Yes, sir, please. Could you just introduce your organization?
So myself, Rajendra Atula. I am heading the Discovery Chemistry Group at Essentia Biopharma.
Okay.
So we are in Hyderabad and Vizag in manufacturing, and also we have a US lab.
Okay.
Coming to the employee well-being, one of the initiatives that we have taken up very recently is the containment philosophy.
Okay.
So when chemists, especially working in the laboratory, so deal with the chemicals, solvents, lot of exposure, and while the safety standards have improved and the PPE is mandatory, still the scope of inhalation or exposure to the chemicals is very, very high. So now what we are doing is, we are identifying all the operations wherever chemical exposure is involved and see the solution that we can come up with. Like for example, use rotary evaporators. So we are coming up with some enclosures that are connected to the scrubbers. So the exposure may not be cut down 100%, but certainly more than 90-95% exposure would come down.
Okay.
And likewise, there are some other areas like weighing the chemicals or operating some purification systems. Be it small quantities or larger volumes, the exposure is going to certainly impact. At the young age, people may not realize, but over a period of time, they'll start really seeing that.
In fact, that was exactly the point that I wanted to raise is, while we want to do things which are good for employees, often employees out of habit would not be very comfortable adopting those initiatives, right? So do you see any challenges around that, or what do you do to make sure that the adoption percentage of employees to these new initiatives is increased?
So certainly, the change is a big subject, right? So the change management is primarily top down, and we practice and then we spend time and then we keep motivating them to adopt. And it may take a little time, but certainly once they understand the real impact of that initiative, they'll quickly get into that. I mean, at least this generation is getting mature, as you mentioned.
And how do you ensure that they understand the real impact? Let's say you mentioned change management is top driven. So what are the kind of initiatives or metrics that you track to show to the people who will be impacted by these initiatives that these are actually beneficial for them? Do you do some kind of statistical analysis, or how do you showcase that?
As I mentioned, it is in the implementation stage, as one of our colleagues mentioned. So we also record the volatiles in the environment, and once you have these enclosure systems and then you compare that, there's going to be a significant change, and that itself speaks. So in which environment you were and which environment you are and now in. So that itself gives them answer, and then from there I don't think it will take time.
Okay. And do you see any resistance from any specific business units, people who might not be very comfortable with, these initiatives because it might be a cost impact involved? Do you see any challenges in convincing?
So naturally for all these initiatives, right, so management need to have the determination and the interest to get into all these kind of initiatives. So it may take little time for each organization to implement depending on the cost involved in that. But once that is approved, and we do not really see any challenge or issues or apprehensions from any different kind of units or laboratories in the implementation process.
Okay. And, I'll just sort of throw that question open to the others as well. Where, let's say, there has been some activity or initiative planned. Any thoughts around where you've seen challenges because, let's say, an influential person in the system is not very convinced and you've had to do something to convince them? Any examples of that where, because the initiative itself was quite powerful, that's helped change perceptions? So what I understand from the discussion so far is predominantly it's the top management which essentially decides that this initiative needs to be done and then it is percolated down. Yeah, please.
I think it's a collective effort. It's only that only the management need to approve the budget for the implementation. So that depends how quickly you can implement certain changes, certain improvements, depending on the decision making from the management. It's not that management only decides what to do.
Right.
One question, you were saying a lot of things that you guys are doing internally. You guys also recording it in some way, just to make sure that some of, let's say for example,
as I said, the containment philosophy, right?
Yes.
So the lab is, the construction is almost close to completion.
Okay.
So once that is done, so we would like to record the data from the other lab.
Okay.
And record the data from this lab.
Very good. Okay.
So for internally, we also be satisfied that yes, this is a fact.
Yeah.
And then that's going to be part of whenever we meet any clients, we proudly say that this is what we are implementing.
Very nice.
According to all of you, what are the triggers that the management has for them to start thinking about this? Start setting some targets internally or taking some initiatives. It could either be holistic, it could either be from ESG perspective, or it could be very, very specific. So I'll give you some examples. It could be the investors asking for it could be the customers asking for some specific requirements, or it could be your peers doing a lot and just to be able to so if there was a peer benchmarking done and to stand against the competition. So what do you think is the main trigger here?
I think you have already answered. In this generation, right, so people are being expressive, outspoken, and then there are certain expectations. Now, earlier it is from the employer to employee. Now, employees are also having expectations. And obviously, these expectations will come based on their exposure or the prior association with other organizations. So, if a person is associated with a company with certain practices, and if he goes to another company, they will expect same or better. So that itself sets a standard for the other organization that yes, we do need to implement, irrespective of the cost implication that we have initially. But now, for example, earlier people used to talk only about the safety and quality. If you really see the CDMOs in the manufacturer. Now everyone talks safety, quality and sustainability. After the COP26, it has gone up even significantly higher. Pretty good. Even Maharatnas are also now getting into ESG initiatives. As you rightly mentioned, while it is there in 99 days, it's only for the last couple of years we started hearing about the ESG.
So 2 points I would like to take from what you just mentioned, okay? And one was around employee expectations. I know there are organizations who have a lot of focus on hiring the best talent. So are you doing anything around that to make sure that you're highlighting your sustainability credentials to make your organization a preferred employer for the kind of talent that you want? are you doing any initiatives around that, which is not measuring what you are doing in your organization for the sake of showcasing to, other peers, but actually to potential employees? Is there any activity around that? And, I would encourage the people who have not spoken in the room to please speak up with your experiences. The gentleman at the back in blue, sir, if you would like to share something.
This is myself, Vinod Kumar, from CBRE Life Sciences. Basically, we are working for generic pharma. We are in startup actually. There is no commercial extent now. We are working with R&D only. Coming to employee safety, see, we are following mostly we are handling instruments like HPLC and care. There is a chance of some evaporations. There we are using some infant drugs to avoid exposure with chemicals and segregation of effluents from HPLC. These are the practices that we are taking now.
Okay. And how are you publicizing this information in the public domain? And what are the specific parameters that you are mentioning to make sure that potential employees choose CBR over other competitors? How are you making it, or are you, if you are not, then how would you like to make it explicit to employees so they choose CBR? Any thoughts around that? Anybody else, please? I mean, please.
This cannot be possible for startups, small vendors. Definitely, it is viable for big volume companies.
And how do you suggest that be done?
Companies or MNCs. It cannot be. We cannot think of that type of expenditure into that. The employer always look into the safety aspect of the employee.
Right.
For that, he doesn't mind to invest as much as should you see that the employee is happy with regard to safety. Beyond that, beyond that, whatever you are asking, that requires a lot of investment goes.
So just to, just to address that point, of course, completely agree that to do it at a large scale and to cover the entire employee base, it would be a huge investment. So what we started doing with some companies, which do not have a budget assigned for this at this moment. As part of the employee induction program, we've started covering just half an hour to 1 hour of sustainability, just one session on sustainability, which gives them an overview of what the company is doing. That's a trigger point for these new employees joining the firm to understand that our company is not only looking at all the other aspects of health, safety, environment, whatever, but also doing CSR. These are the CSR initiatives of the company, which the company is doing anyway, but the employees are not aware of it in most cases. These are the ESG initiatives that the company has, and this is a window for me to contribute. This is a place where I could perhaps use my other skills, apart from what I am here for.
So we are doing it now, actually. We are enlightening the new employees about our CSR activities, about our exclusively that ESH activities, what all we are here, how safe they are working in the laboratory. That we are enlightening them.
Right.
Use them in the conference.
Wonderful. I think, while I wanted the session to be separate about, the environmental and the social part, I see that there's quite a bit of convergence, and probably, I'll continue in that vein for the next 5 minutes before we close. So the second point that I wanted to take from the point you mentioned earlier is around larger companies doing it, like the Maharatna companies, and that setting a benchmark for companies to do this, right? So I would like to understand how many of your, you have experienced this in your organizations where the management has come back saying that, this is what industry is doing, so therefore we need to do that. What's been your experience? Do you see any external benchmark? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I have worked before in the safety protocols are very good, very stringent, and we used to follow that. So when we are coming to a small company, maybe the company is big, maybe the unit is small, so it's not possible to do all these activities. So, but if we try to do all the things here and it's working, and we have to make maybe the management and the scientists to understand what is the benefits of that. So really means you are working in a big organization, maybe the following very nice safety rules that will definitely impact in the coming organization, and you are going to do the same after that also. It may not be not that much investing, but for the rules very strictly and means manner.
So what are, even for a small company, the question is what the organization would have certain priorities, right? I mean, in terms of making sure you're the top notch for your, for your clients. Yeah. How do you make sure that you are more appealing to your clients in a competitive market, or as I mentioned earlier, for the potential talent that you want to hire? Even for small companies, these would be drivers, I would assume, right? Making sure that I get more business, and I'm the preferred supplier. So are we doing something around that?
Yeah, in the safety world, if I say in our company, we do like trainings, and we keep some modules to go with that, and get the certification for that. And to do compare with the other sites, like maybe smaller and easier, the other production units. Like every year, they do some competition, what is the best quality policies, best safety practices who are maintaining, and doing some awards also. So that also we are doing.
Okay. In fact, I just want to share a small anecdote, that we did for, one of our clients is, we created this environment, ES Hackathon, okay, which was similar to how we do ideation sessions and, give away prizes, with the differentiation that after we gave away the prizes, we told the teams that we would give you a small fund to actually convert your idea into implementation. So we don't stop at just rewarding you with some prize money and you walk away and we all forget. Yeah. The idea is, if you've got a good idea, here is an opportunity for you to run with that idea and make sure that you are actually showing the proof of it in the market. Okay. So in case you are doing these best practices, I think this is something that I would strongly encourage you to think about if it's feasible for the organization as well as for the others, that we don't just stop at rewarding good ideas by giving a prize or a cash reward. We go ahead and we show them that the organization is standing behind you. If they are doing good research, can you ensure that you have a small ring-fenced fund, okay, to support that cutting-edge piece, specifically on that initiative? And can we expand the scope of such rewards to not just specific R&D initiatives, but also initiatives in social? If somebody is coming up with a good initiative which engages associates, can we encourage people to do that and give them a small amount of budget in the other locations so that it creates that culture?
I have some update on that as well. So in SAP, what we have been doing recently in the last 3-4 years is also, we are a tech company, you guys are also into some sort of creating products and outcomes, right? So how can we be innovative?
And one of the areas of innovation we have picked up is sustainability, right? So in fact, there was a similar thing that happened in Indrajit last year, and one of the initiatives was to pick up an internal idea, which was then funded, I think, to the tune of about $50,000 to take it to the next level. So the idea now is essentially in the stage where it can now be created as an add-on tech on top of SAP ERP, right? So it just it of course gives initiatives for SAP to earn revenues out of it, but even otherwise, it is a massive morale booster for employees, right? I mean, there were 6 to 7 people who came presented, teams actually, and one of them got selected. This was dedicated to the the electronic waste that we produced, right? So within the organization, right? So every household, every one of us, there's so much of laptops. We have about 20,000 employees in India. So obviously every 2 years, 3 years, there is replacement of these devices that happens. There are phones, there are laptops, there are keyboards, everything which is electronic. How can we actually save or reduce the burden as we recycle it back. So some very interesting stuff that happened. So there is innovation में there is now a sub-vertical we have created called sustainability. So a lot of focus on that. We work with customers in this direction as well. So
wonderful. And I think that's probably the last point that I'll run through the room is on this innovation piece. Okay, have you done anything where you are encouraging your employees to think about what best practices they are bringing to the table, and would you like to think about what could be done in this space going forward, so that that culture of innovation, that culture of cutting edge change is incorporated as part of your organizational culture? Yes, please.
Myself, Rajesh. So coming to the employee well-being, the company has initiated one initiative like fitness, health and happiness. So employee well-being, not only employee well-being, it involves even the employee family members also. This is the initiative taken to encourage the employee as well as their family members during their health, fitness and happiness. It's a great initiative. Recently, last year, this company was awarded as a great place to work. International Intel was awarded a great place to work. So this and regarding the innovation, what we are seeing, we have incorporated this as a part of the KPI. KRS annual performance each and every. So whoever makes an innovation, they will be getting a separate reward for them, like in terms of cash reward, 3,000 rupees. So initially there was no R&D center for government innovation. They have only the manufacturing innovations, innovation. Once this R&D started, there are around 60 patents they were generated from this R&D. Out of those, around 10 to 12 granted, got granted, and remaining are in examination stage. So this is the innovation we got it, and this is separated throughout the manufacturing innovation. So this innovation, they made it as a part of KRA. So every year, some of the people are getting rewarded for this innovations. That is how we are encouraging the.
That's really amazing to hear, and I want to really applaud that approach. You might have heard of 3M. Actually, 3M has this concept of 1/3 time. So every employee has the opportunity to spend 1/3 of their working time on pet projects, which can help develop new products. To the extent where 3M's 40% of the revenues come from products which have been created in the last 5 years. So to your point, I think if we can encourage this culture of innovation, that not only is beneficial for the employee, but actually it's beneficial from your top line perspective because it gives you new channels of revenue. And that is also good for employee well-being because the message that we're sending out to market is we encourage you to think out of the box, which links back in terms of ESG metrics about employee well-being. Yeah. So with that, what I will do is I will wrap up and try to summarize the sense. And thank you so much to every one of you for your contributions. There were quite a few interesting points that came out, but I would like to talk about 4 of them that stood out for me and hopefully for all of you as well. The first one was around structured trainings. We have heard from a lot of companies that doing structured trainings, and Anu mentioned the example where they are also doing it as part of induction, where employees very early on in their employee life cycle journey within an organization are exposed to what the organization is doing in sustainability. And if we can embed that at every stage of the employee life cycle, we are ensuring that we create that culture of sustainability across all our associates. The second was around structural changes. I think the gentleman from biology mentioned about green buildings, and beyond the fact that there's a management push, one of the things that stood out for me from one of the other examples is the fact that we could use structural changes within our wet lab processes to ensure that we are focusing it not only on employee well-being but on optimization, which in turn links to our bottom line benefits. So there is a combined convergence of economic benefit with social impact, which helps you showcase your organization, having a strong ESG credential. So that was the second piece that stood out for me, is to look at your current processes and see if you can identify specific metrics and optimize them, which have an impact not only on employees but also on your business. The third piece was around change management. What came out very clearly was these initiatives are best driven when you have top management buy-in. So for all of you out there who are looking to drive these kind of initiatives, it's important that you customize your messaging aligned to what Anu mentioned in one of our case studies, that if you want your initiative to succeed within the organizational setup, it's important that you spend time to customize that message for each of the stakeholders who are important for you to get approvals from. That is your best bet to be able to drive change in the organization and bring in ESG elements. The fourth piece was around innovation. And this is where what we understood from some of the examples is, if you encourage employees to innovate, it is not just good for employee well-being, but also for the business, because you are sending out a very strong message that we care for you. It links directly to some of the initiatives that were mentioned in terms of, fitness, health and happiness, or belonging. So through these innovative measures, we are increasing the health quotient of our employees, and that is something that, if we are able to report in some of our reporting mechanisms, can help us position ourselves as an employer of choice. So I think these were the four key things that stood out based on the discussions that we have had, and I hope this discussion has been useful for all of you, and you have specific things that you can take away and implement in your organizations. Thank you, everyone, gentlemen. Thank you, Anu. Thanks, everyone, for that. Yeah, last comments from Manish, please.
Just before we leave, I just had, so this is not an entertainment quiz anymore, but I just thought, rather than doing it in Menti, we'll just raise our hands. So we'll make it a little simple. I'll just present this, if you're able to see it on the screen. Yeah, so this is an image. I'm sure it looks a little complicated also, but this is, what is it? Sorry. Yeah. Is it United Nations Sustainable Development Goals? Is it Pollution Control Board requirements? Or is it the WHO or World Health Organization COVID protocols? Everybody who thinks it is UN SDGs? United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. Okay, you have 5 more seconds to think about it. I'll just change the picture as well. Five seconds over. Option number 1. Raise your hands, please. More hands now. Option number 2, PCB requirements. Any hands? WHO COVID protocol. Okay, great. Most of us thought it is United Nations SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals. It is right. Financial reporting, if top line is revenue, bottom line is profitability. What does the green line indicate? Tough hai thoda. So in any financial reporting, right? So we keep talking bottom line kya, bottom line kya. Bottom line is profitability. Kitna kama rahe ho, kitna margin hai. Top line is revenues. What is the green line? Close. Very nice. Yeah. Sorry? No, so it's not the health of the company. Green line indicates how sustainable is the organization. So all the ESG reporting that you do or will go and contributing to the green line. So if the green line is low, you're not doing very well on ESG reporting. If the green line is high, which means you're doing very well on the ESG reporting. So these are some of the financial terminologies which ESG will report. I have a last question. in India, is the ESG reporting compulsory for companies? How many of you think yes? How many of you think no? How many of you think maybe? Safe answer. Indrajit, so you were discussing that SEBI has mandated for 1,000 companies, top 1,000 companies. So it is mandatory for 1,000 of them. Rest of us are still not mandated. But yeah, it's somewhere in between, right? The answer. With that, I think please give yourselves a big hand. You know, coming to this session, I think it's a commitment to ESG or sustainability in not just as an organization representative, but also in your personal capacities, right? So we spent almost 2 hours here today on ESG, which I think kudos to you guys again. And as I said, Indrajit, in some form, if we can continue this, you know, once in 3 months or once a quarter, just to bring this up, bring the group together, see where we have moved. Not necessarily just for us to do ESG reporting of our group, but just to make sure that, you know, in life we are progressing on these topics. So we'll be more than happy to do that.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, you've touched a very significant raw chord here, because the whole point of coming to this event was really to encourage all of us to think more in terms of ESG, and not just think but do. So I think, you know, I'll probably pass it on to Kirti and Mr. GV Prasad to indicate, you know, what all we can do beyond this session, so that this is not just a roundtable, but an ongoing journey towards ESG excellence.
No pressure, guys.
Thank you, Anu. Thank you, Indrajit. Thank you, Manish. I think with this session, we have laid the seed of ESG in as a core philosophy at IKP, and we need to sustain this. If we are talking about sustainability, so we need to sustain this discussion, and we'll plan for something 3 monthly. And as rightly pointed out, ESG cannot be a zero-sum game, so we need to think of it as a team, as a society, and holistically. So we'll definitely come up with some strategy to convene every 3 months and come up with more focused discussions where individual industries can bring in their pain points, and I'm sure after everyone has a lot of takeaways from today's session. So there will be some introspection, certain reflections, and they'll go back to their teams and discuss about the roundtable today, and we'll have more questions, and we'll forward it to all 3 of you, and maybe we'll have some another discussion in 3 months or 4 months to take the discussion forward, take this forward, and let's
absolutely
maybe have more a quantitative approach, where we can measure that how far we have come from today, from October 29 today to, let's say, January 29, 2023. So
and I think
thank you, everyone.
More challenges also from everybody. So
correct.
Now when you go back and you try to implement something, what are the challenges you're facing? How can we resolve that?
Thank you from our side.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your participation, and pleasure interacting with all of you. Have a good day.